By the time the movers finished loading the truck, my childhood home looked hollow. Bare walls, open shelves, dust where portraits used to hang. My mother stood in the doorway, clipboard in hand, calm as if she were supervising a routine delivery. When the last box disappeared, she finally said it, without looking at me. He was always the extra one. Today, we just make it official. 3 hours later, my grandfather's will was scheduled to be read. By morning, I would no longer belong to this family on paper, the only place they ever truly cared about. But to understand how I became disposable, you have to go back to the first time I learned I didn't fit. I was 9 years old, sitting on the staircase, doing math homework I didn't need help with. The kitchen door was half open. My parents thought I was outside. My father's voice was low, practical. If it weren't for him, everything would have been simpler. There was a pause. Then my mother answered, softer but firm. Just make sure he never finds out. I didn't know what it was. I only knew the tone, the finality. That year, my birthday passed quietly. No cake, no guests. That year, my photo disappeared from the living room frame, replaced by my brother's graduation picture. That year, something small but strange started to bother me. Every official paper I signed, school forms, permission slips, even holiday cards, my signature never quite matched the rest of the family's. Same last name, same handwriting style I'd been taught. But something was always off. A tilt, a pressure point, like my hand instinctively refused to copy theirs. I asked once. My mother smiled and said, "You're imagining things." 20 years later, the lawyer placed the will on the table. My name was there, not among the heirs, not among the acknowledgments. At the very bottom. A conditional clause. A footnote pretending to be a person. And suddenly, everything aligned. The silence, the distance, the way love in this house had always felt. Rationed. I wasn't unloved by accident. I was kept at arm's length on purpose, prepared, positioned, not as a son, but as a liability they'd been managing since childhood. In my family, roles were assigned early and never revised. My brother was the future, the proof, the one whose name was spoken with pride and repetition, as if saying it enough times could make it permanent. I was the silence between conversations. Not ignored exactly, acknowledged just enough to avoid questions. Fed, schooled, kept present. Like an object you don't throw away, but also don't display. At dinner, they spoke over me, not to me. When relatives visited, I was introduced last with a vague phrase, "He's doing his own thing." No details, no expectations, no investment. I learned early that excellence was dangerous. When I brought home perfect grades, my father frowned, like I'd made a tactical error. When I won a regional competition, my mother suggested I not get carried away. Praise was rationed carefully, like they were afraid too much of it might trigger something irreversible. So I adapted. I became agreeable, quiet, useful, the son who never asked for money, the son who didn't need help, the son who made himself small enough to fit anywhere they needed him, and nowhere they didn't. From the outside, we looked functional, respectable, stable. Inside, everything was calculated, especially paperwork. My mother controlled documents, always had. Birth certificates, school records, medical forms. Anything that carried a name or a date passed through her hands first. She said it was organization, but I noticed patterns. My vaccinations were recorded late. My school enrollment required clarifications. Once, at 16, I overheard a phone call where she said, "No, that file shouldn't be connected. It complicates things." I didn't know what things she meant. I only knew my name was often followed by delays, The night before the will reading, I found an old folder in the garage. Dusty, unlabeled, hidden behind paint cans no one used anymore. Inside were photocopies, documents I'd never seen before, a birth record, a hospital discharge form, and a consent page signed not by my father, but by someone else. Different handwriting, different signature, left-leaning, heavy pressure. The same unnatural tilt I'd seen my whole life, the one that never matched mine. My hands shook as I realized the truth forming too fast to stop. I wasn't extra, I was misfiled. And whatever secret they'd buried, my existence wasn't the problem. My existence was the evidence. The will reading took place in my grandfather's study, the only room in the house that had never been redecorated to match my mother's taste. Dark wood, leather chairs, the faint smell of old paper and tobacco, history refusing to be modernized. The lawyer cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses. My parents sat side by side, composed, already rehearsed in their grief. My brother leaned back, confident, arms crossed. He knew what this day would give him. They all did. I was placed at the edge of the table, not excluded, just positioned. The lawyer began with the expected names, properties, accounts, shares. My brother received most of it. No surprise there. My parents nodded subtly, as if confirming an internal checklist. Then the lawyer paused. "There is an additional clause," he said, "requested to be read last." My mother stiffened. He turned the page. "To my family," he read, "I leave what you expect. To the one who was never meant to be invisible, I leave the truth." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Breaths caught. The lawyer looked directly at me. "This clause is conditional upon the presence of my grandson," he continued, "and must be read aloud." My father spoke for the first time. "Is that really necessary?" "Yes," the lawyer replied calmly. It was explicit. Silence fell like pressure. He read on. "There has been a lie in this family for decades, one maintained not out of cruelty but convenience, a lie signed, filed, and reinforced through silence." My mother's hand tightened around her bracelet. I noticed how white her knuckles were. "This grandson," the lawyer said, "was never extra. He was never a mistake. He was misattributed." My brother sat up. My heart pounded. The man listed as his father is not his biological parent. The words landed heavy and clean. No drama, no hesitation, just truth. My mother stood abruptly. "This is absurd." But the lawyer didn't stop. Attached are documents confirming paternity, consent forms, and a sealed letter written by the man who signed them. He slid an envelope across the table. Toward me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Because my father, was staring at the floor, shoulders collapsed, like a man finally released from a sentence he never chose. And my mother? She wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the door, like she was calculating how much time she had left before everything burned. No one spoke for several seconds after the truth landed. Not because they were shocked, because they were recalculating. My mother was the first to recover. She always was. Emotion never stopped her. Only inefficiency did. "This changes nothing," she said, sitting back down slowly. "Blood doesn't rewrite history." The lawyer didn't respond. He simply opened another folder. "It does," he said, "when history was built on a false signature." He laid the documents out one by one. A consent form signed decades ago. A private agreement between two men. A clause transferring responsibility, but not lineage. The signature at the bottom leaned left. Heavy pressure. Identical to the one I'd seen in the garage. The totem. My mother's jaw tightened. That was handled. My grandfather's words echoed in my head, a lie maintained through silence. My brother finally spoke. "So what? He gets pity now?" The lawyer looked at him. "No, he gets standing." That word changed everything. Standing meant claims. Standing meant access. Standing meant the lie had legal weight, and so did the truth. My father finally lifted his head. His eyes were red, but not with guilt, with exhaustion. "I told you this would come back," he said quietly to my mother. She didn't look at him. "You were supposed to keep him small." And there it was, not hatred, not shame, strategy. They hadn't pushed me aside because I didn't belong. They'd done it because I belonged too much. The lawyer continued. Due to the misattribution, several trusts were structured incorrectly. Assets were routed to avoid potential claims. My mother stood again. "This is intimidation." "No," the lawyer said evenly. "This is correction." My brother's confidence cracked. "What does this mean?" "It means," the lawyer replied, "that until this is resolved, distribution is frozen." Silence snapped tight. Frozen meant no access, no transfers, no control. My mother looked at me then, really looked. Not as a son, not as family, as a variable she'd failed to neutralize. "We can fix this," she said softly. "Privately." I shook my head. "You already tried that. My whole life." Her eyes hardened. "You don't understand what you're breaking." I met her gaze. "I do. That's why it matters." Because for the first time, they weren't managing me. They were reacting to me. And somewhere beneath the fear, I saw it clearly. They didn't raise an extra child. They raised a contingency. They didn't ask me to leave after the will reading. That was the first mistake. Instead, my mother suggested we take a breath and reconvene in the dining room, as if truth were a scheduling inconvenience. Tea appeared, chairs were rearranged, the house slipped back into its familiar illusion of civility, but the air had changed. My brother sat closer to my parents now, protective instinct kicking in too late. My father stayed silent, staring at the wood grain of the table like it might tell him what to do next. My mother folded her hands. "Let's be practical," she said. "Nothing good comes from dragging this out." Practical. That was her favorite word when feelings threatened efficiency. She slid a document across the table toward me. A prepared offer. Money. Enough to disappear comfortably. "In exchange," she continued, "you acknowledge the error, waive any claims, and we correct the records quietly. No courts, no press, no damage. Damage. As if I were the disaster, not the proof of one." I didn't touch the paper. "You planned this," I said, "didn't you?" She didn't deny it. "I managed it." My father flinched at the word. "You knew," I said to him. He nodded once, barely. I didn't know how to fix it. My brother laughed under his breath. "So you ruin everything because you're bored?" I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't angry. He was scared. Because for the first time, his inheritance wasn't guaranteed by blood, only by paperwork. And paperwork was fragile. The lawyer spoke again. "There is another matter." My mother's eyes snapped up. "We're done." "No," he said calmly. "We're not." He turned to me. "Your grandfather left a final instruction. If coercion occurred, all assets would be redirected to a neutral trust until adjudication." My mother's composure cracked. "That's extortion." "It's protection," the lawyer replied. I finally picked up the offer. The paper felt thin, temporary. "You spent my whole life minimizing me," I said quietly. "Now you want to buy my silence." She leaned forward. "You don't understand the consequences." "I do," I said. "You raised me to." I tore the document cleanly in half. Then again, then again. The sound was sharp, final. My father closed his eyes. My brother stood abruptly. "You're not doing this." But I already had. Because the truth wasn't just out, it was uncontainable. And the next move wouldn't be a negotiation. It would be a betrayal. It was my father who broke first. Not in the room, not in front of them. Later that night, when the house had gone quiet and the lie had nowhere left to hide, he knocked on my door like a stranger. "I didn't protect you," he said before I could speak, "and that's on me." He sat down heavily, older than he'd ever looked, smaller. "I wasn't supposed to be your father," he continued. "Not the way they tell the story. I agreed to the paperwork because your grandfather begged me to." That stopped me. He said the man who helped bring you into this world wasn't safe. Not for you, not for the family. He said if your name followed his, you'd spend your life paying for his mistakes. I thought of the frozen assets, the hidden trusts, the fear in my mother's eyes. "He wasn't protecting the family," I said slowly. "He was protecting me." My father nodded. And himself. He helped clean up the mess, money, debts, people who didn't like loose ends. Ghost debts. The phrase surfaced like something I'd always known but never named. "That's why your mother managed you," he went on. "Why she kept you quiet. If anyone connected the signatures, the dates, the accounts, everything collapsed. Including her. She told me if you ever found out," he said, voice cracking, "you'd destroy us." I thought of the left-leaning signature, the pressure, the way my own hand had always resisted copying theirs. "Who was he?" I asked. My father hesitated, then spoke. "A partner, before me, before marriage, before stability. He vanished the same year you were born." The word vanished settled wrong. Not dead, not gone. Erased. "And my grandfather?" I asked. "He built the trust to contain the damage," my father said. "But he also built something else." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "I was told to give you this only if they tried to silence you." Inside was a single page, old, yellowed, and a signature at the bottom. Left-leaning. Heavy pressure. The same as mine. "My grandfather knew," I whispered. My father nodded. "He knew you'd recognize it." Because I wasn't the problem. I was the pattern repeating. And suddenly I understood why the family hadn't just excluded me. They'd been waiting to see whether I'd disappear like the man before me, or finish what he started. The house turned on me the next morning. Not loudly, not all at once. In the careful, procedural way my family did everything dangerous. My brother stopped speaking to me entirely, not even insults, just absence. Like if he didn't acknowledge me, I might revert back to a problem he didn't have to solve. My mother went the opposite direction. She became kind. She asked if I'd slept well, if I wanted breakfast, if I remembered the neighbor's son, such a nice boy, who worked in corporate law now. That was how I knew she was moving pieces. By noon, the lawyer called. His voice was clipped, controlled. "Your mother has filed an emergency petition," he said. "She's claiming undue influence, mental distress. She's suggesting you were manipulated by your grandfather in his final years." I laughed once, dry, sharp. "She's saying I'm unstable." "Yes," he replied, "and she's very good at it." By evening, it escalated. My phone buzzed with messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Carefully worded concern. "We're worried about you. Your mother says you're not yourself. Maybe take a step back. They weren't asking. They were documenting." Then came the final move. Police. Not an arrest, a wellness check. 2 officers stood in the doorway while my mother watched from the hall, arms crossed, composed. "We just need to ask a few questions," one of them said gently. I answered calmly, clearly, truthfully. But truth doesn't matter when a narrative is already prepared. After they left, my mother finally dropped the mask. "You see?" she said quietly. "This is how this ends if you don't stop." I stared at her. "You're trying to erase me." She shook her head. "I'm trying to contain you." That night, I didn't sleep. I read everything my grandfather left behind. Trust structures, notes, marginal warnings written in a tight, angry hand. If they push, they're guilty. If they panic, follow the money. At 3 a.m., my father knocked again. "They're going to freeze you out," he whispered. "Socially, legally, they'll make you the threat." I looked at him. "And you?" He swallowed. "I already chose once. I won't do it again." For the first time in my life, I believed him. Because now I understood the truth of this family. They didn't survive by loving each other. They survived by sacrificing whoever knew too much. And this time, that someone was me. The collapse didn't start with shouting. It started with spreadsheets. At dawn, the lawyer called again, this time not cautious, not measured, excited. "We found it," he said, "the loop." My grandfather had hidden it well, not in a single account, not in one trust, but in a repeating pattern, small transfers, dormant entities, circular loans that never quite closed, ghost debts, money that didn't belong to anyone, moving just enough to stay alive. All of them trace back to one source, the lawyer continued. A shell company dissolved the year you were born. I didn't need him to say the name. The vanished partner, the left-leaning signature. Me. "Your mother has been servicing those debts for decades," he said. "Quietly, using family assets, using trusts meant for inheritance." My stomach dropped. Not from fear, from clarity. "That's why I was kept small," I said, "why I couldn't be visible." "Yes," he replied, "because if you ever asserted standing, every audit would widen, and once it did, she'd be exposed." By noon, the freeze expanded. Banks started asking questions. Trust managers requested explanations. 2 board members resigned, pending review. My brother called me for the first time since the will. "You did this," he said, voice shaking. "You're destroying everything." I almost told him the truth, that everything had been rotting long before me. Instead, I said, "I didn't build it, I just stopped pretending." By evening, my mother lost control. She stormed into my room without knocking, face flushed, composure gone. "You think you're righteous?" she snapped. "Do you know what I protected you from?" I held up the envelope my father had given me. The signature stared back at us both. "I know exactly what you protected," I said. "Yourself." She froze. For the first time, she looked afraid, not of exposure, of recognition. Because the final truth was unavoidable now, the man she erased didn't disappear. He repeated, in me, and every document she'd forged to bury him had trained me, unintentionally, to see the cracks. By midnight, the lawyer sent one last message. Tomorrow, the trusts unlock, and the sealed letter will be entered into record. I sat alone in the dark, the house breathing around me. They'd tried to erase a man once. This time, the evidence was alive. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. No grandeur, no drama, just wood, glass, and the quiet hum of systems designed to pretend neutrality. My mother sat perfectly still at the defense table, spine straight, expression composed. If someone didn't know her, they might think she was calm. I knew better. She was calculating. The judge asked the lawyer to proceed. He stood, adjusted his papers, then did something unexpected. He held up a single document. Not a trust, not a financial record, a signature page. "This," he said, "is the connective tissue of the entire case." The screen behind him lit up. One by one, signatures appeared. Decades apart. Different documents, but identical, left-leaning, heavy pressure. A slight drag on the final stroke. The totem. Gasps rippled through the room. "These signatures belong to the same individual," the lawyer continued. "One legally erased, one deliberately misattributed, and one who has been sitting in this courtroom the entire time." All eyes turned to me. My mother's breath caught. Just once. "The defendant argues coincidence," the lawyer said. "But coincidence doesn't repeat across birth records, shell companies, consent forms, and trust authorizations." He turned to the judge. "This family didn't just hide a child, they hid a liability, a man whose debts were never resolved, only redistributed." My mother stood. "This is character assassination." "No," the lawyer replied calmly. "This is authorship." He opened the final envelope. My grandfather's sealed letter, written in a hand older than fear. If you are reading this, then they tried to silence him. Follow the signatures. They always tell the truth. The judge read silently, slowly, then looked up. "Proceed with the audit," he said. The room broke. Whispers, movement, phones lighting up. My brother stared at me like I'd become someone else. My mother didn't look at me at all. She looked at the signature on the screen, like it was a ghost that had finally learned how to speak. Because the truth wasn't just exposed, it was provable. And it had my hand all over it. The fallout didn't arrive like a storm. It came like paperwork, audits, suspensions, quiet resignations disguised as health reasons, accounts frozen under neutral language that pretended no one was guilty yet. My mother never went to prison. That surprised people. What she lost was worse. Control. The trusts were dismantled and rebuilt under court supervision. Assets redistributed. The family name removed from boards it had dominated for decades. Invitations stopped coming. Doors closed softly, permanently. She stayed in the house, alone, because no one trusts a strategist once the strategy is visible. My brother left first, took what remained untouched and moved somewhere anonymity could still pass as dignity. He never spoke to me again, not out of hatred, but because without the lie, he didn't know who he was. My father testified, not dramatically, not heroically, just honestly. That was his redemption and his punishment. As for me, I received what the will intended, not power, responsibility. The corrected trusts were placed partially in my name, partially into a neutral foundation. The money tied to the ghost debts was seized, laundered clean through courts and restitution. I became solvent by surviving, not by winning. The letter from my grandfather was entered into record. The last line never quoted publicly. He'd written it only for me. "You are not your father's shadow. You are his echo, proof that erasure fails." I understood then what the paradox was. The truth didn't give me a family, it cost me one. But it gave me something far more dangerous. Clarity. I learned that blood doesn't bind people. Documents do. That silence is not peace, it's maintenance. And that being extra is often just another word for inconvenient evidence. I kept my name, I kept my signature, left-leaning, heavy pressure. I stopped trying to correct it, because it was never wrong. It was inherited.